Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Eye Test FC. North London is red. Cheers. Two weeks ago was when we last spoke, and they say a week is a long time in football, 2 weeks is a lifetime. 2 weeks, if you're an Arsenal fan, which is like the most reactionary fan base in the world, it's probably an eternity, right? And 2 weeks ago, a penalty was awarded for a clash of heads at Brighton. And since then, Arsenal have been out of the FA Cup on penalties. Arsenal have gone out without really much of a fight, practically gone out without much of a fight in the League Cup semi-final. Arsenal have lost Jesus, who was just playing himself back into form for, definitely the whole season, but probably the whole calendar year as well. So it looks like crisis. And then the news of Zubimendi to Arsenal in the summer was leaked. Arsenal win the North London derby, and there is again a bit of cautious optimism with Arsenal. And even for the other teams, it looks like a lot has happened since that same day. Maguire skied a shot over the bar in the 90th minute to deny Man United a win. Then they scraped through on penalties against Arsenal. They have beat Southampton with like a hat-trick in the last 10 minutes, of hat-trick of goals in the last 10 minutes. And I want to cover United a little bit. And I think it's the last time I'm going to speak about United for a while. Because in those 3 games, sure, they came out with respectable, results in the last fortnight, but I really worry for them because against Arsenal, they created nothing all game. They were really lucky to come out of that game with a win. I know it was on penalties. They deserve to win the penalty shootout, but the 120 minutes of football, they shouldn't have. That game, 9 out of 10 times, would not go into penalties. Against Southampton, the bottom club, at home, the amount of times Onana was called on with brilliant saves, Suleimana on the left cutting in, very raw talent, so he didn't have that end product, but the amount of times he cut in and created chances for Southampton. Even United's goals, fine, the first goal was well taken, the second goal was just bad defending where the defender was not ball side, and the third was a late Christmas present to seal the win for Man United. That game alone, plus the game at the Emirates and Anfield, just shows that, sure, they could win the odd game, but it's going to be a struggle for them. And unless they win 8 or 10 games, I don't really want to cover them because they're right now 12th in the league. And this is the story of United's season so far. And I think it's fair to say it's a write-off. And I don't see them being consistent enough. And moving to another team who I don't think are consistent enough, Liverpool, right? Because they were lucky to come away with a draw against Liverpool. They lost the League Cup semi-finals against Tottenham, but sure, they probably at home will beat Tottenham to go into the final. They dropped points against Nottingham Forest, and I think it is a bit worrying for them because they're playing with their first 11 and they're still dropping points. And I said this last episode where teams are going to sit back against them. This episode will probably come out right before they kick off against Brentford. And I do expect Brentford to sit back as well against them. So I do see them cracking a little bit. I do see certain flaws. And hey, look, if you guys watch Liverpool and don't think there are any flaws in their performance, fair enough. But I think the season isn't done. I don't think they're going to run away with the title because I do see certain cracks in their performance. Man City, for all their stick that they've received, they lost the Ballon d'Or winner and they dropped points against Brentford last week. And since then, they signed 4 top-tier talents for over 200 million in January. They re-signed Haaland, gave him a contract extension for like 9.5 years, which is mind-boggling. Worth, what was it? £860,000 a week if you consider image rights and all of that, reportedly. And that just shows, like, irrespective of what goes on legally with, the charges, they're competing on a very different level. One of those 4 players that they signed, Omar Marmoush from Eintracht Frankfurt, Arsenal and Liverpool would have loved to have him, but City are reportedly paying him 300 grand a week. And that would smash Arsenal and Liverpool's wage structure. So no matter what the court of law says, I think the court of public opinion definitely would differ for Man City. I think the titles they've won and the fact that they've just thrown themselves into this title picture with their spending, it's still an asterisk. Guardiola has done great. He has revolutionized football, but it's always an asterisk because none of the other 19 teams can compete against Man City. They just operate on a very different level. And it is what it is because they're able to hire a team of an army of lawyers and prove their innocence on court so they can get away with it. Moving to Arsenal, and boy, we have a lot to cover there. Starting with something which I cannot believe that's happened, and this is just pure toxicity from the Arsenal fans online, which is the abuse that Kai Havertz and his pregnant wife have received. It's just unacceptable. I mean, it's just a game. People miss chances, and it's unacceptable what his wife has received. And people who genuinely support Arsenal know that this guy is a confidence player. And the fans gave him so much love last season. And in just half a season, he was Arsenal's top goal contributor last season. Arsenal finished that season with the most goals that they've scored in the last 20 years, with the most points in the last 20 years. So give him support, give him love, and he's going to come good. And the criticism on Arteta himself, he coached 4 wins, 4-0 wins probably. And it just comes across as they've just scraped a single win and it's crisis. It's not. And I want to go into the game first. So let's talk about that, right? It's Derby Day win for Arsenal fans. It seems like a given, but with how Arsenal have been struggling to buy a win, it seems like gold at this point. And the story of the game was quite similar, where Arsenal dominated the first 20-25 minutes. And I can think of this season alone, right? 2 games against Brighton, probably the game away against Fulham, where Arsenal were on it. Best 20 minutes I've seen, and then Arsenal go and concede a goal with the first or second chance. Not much can be said. It was a well-taken goal by Son. I think the big talking point from that game would have been the corner kick, black and white decision. It was not a corner. The ball went off Trossard, and Arsenal scored from that corner. And it's about time that Arsenal's luck kind of evens out with those decisions. I think there's still a long way to go considering the bad decisions that have gone against Arsenal so far this season. But Arsenal should have not only scored 2. Declan Rice said Arsenal should have probably scored 10 that game. And the amount of chances Arsenal missed, it looked like a nervy scoreline. But I feel that if Arsenal didn't score that from that corner, they would have scored much more or they would have had more chances. But it was good game management from Arteta considering we have 14 first team players who are fit. So I think that's a huge win. And going into more of a macro level picture on the whole season, and Arsenal's half of the season, right? I think Arsenal's finishing has been poor, and that's probably contributed to, 6 points dropped at least this season. And that's to do with Arsenal. That's completely in Arsenal's hands, Arsenal's control. They should have recruited better in the summer. Edu came out the day after the window closed and said Arsenal's plans were not to sign Raheem Sterling, but they signed a winger. And knowing how Arsenal recruit on the profiles that they recruit, we knew they needed an attacking player. There is a perception amongst rival fans that Arteta gets what he wants. He spent big. if you look at how much teams around Arsenal have spent, they have also spent big. And don't get me wrong, the deals of Declan Rice and, Mikel Merino, Kai Havertz, they were big deals. But Arteta has not gotten the players that he's wanted every summer or every transfer window. If you look back on Rafinha, Vlahovic, Benjamin Sesko, you've seen that Arsenal are trying to find a couple of profiles, either on the wing and up top, and they haven't gotten those couple of signings. And this is the story of Arsenal, even over the last 20 years. They've been nearly there. And I think it's always been a couple of signings away. And it's just such a pity that Arsenal are just not going in and getting the job done with those signings. And that's costing Arsenal. But it's not this or this or this as an excuse point of view. It's all of them together are the reason why Arsenal have had a bad season. And the second aspect on this was the decisions. If you look at a player costing Arsenal 6 points, when I'm doing that analysis, I cannot ignore the fact that certain scandalous decisions have also costed Arsenal few points. 2 games against Brighton, home and away. 2 decisions that I've never seen given a red card at home or that penalty away. Never seen in 15 years of watching football. Costed 4 points right there. And if you club that with that sending off for Trossard against Man City, that's 6 points. And if you look where Arsenal are right now, that's the difference between being first and second. Clubbing both of those with the luck that they've had with injuries, 3-4 games in, Odegaard's out for a third of the season. A couple of months after that, Ben White is out for 3 months. When we have both Odegaard and Saka playing really well and Arsenal winning a couple of games with that momentum, Arsenal lose Saka, then they lose Wanyeri, then they lose Sterling for a few games, and then they're left with 14 first-team players. So it just seems like, when it rains, it pours. And this is just pure luck. And if you look at the teams who have won the league in the last 20, 30 years, you need a little bit of luck to go your way. You need a few decisions to go your way. And that's just football, right? And considering everything I just said, the fact that Arsenal are so close to being on par with Liverpool just states that that's the direction football is kind of going to, right? If you ask Arsenal fans what is a nicer Arsenal team to watch, they would probably say the team that lost the league 2 years ago than the team that probably got better points last season. And the team that got better points last season was better to watch than this team. But I think when you become dominant in a league, you need to be a chameleon team. You need to lose your identity of playing football a little bit to encounter different challenges, different problems every game. And that's evident in how Arsenal are setting up. They can go away from home against Brentford and win. They can go away from home against Aston Villa and win. The one thing they're struggling with is beating a low block away from home or at home. And I think different teams also are struggling with that. Chelsea have basically not won a game in 2 months. But you don't hear that as much. Tottenham have an identity and are going forward, but the minute it's a low block, they're struggling. So are Liverpool. So I think this is a common problem that most teams have. But I guess because of the expectations that Arsenal had coming into the season, their problems are a bit more, escalated and more for everyone to see. With that being said, Tottenham and Chelsea, for all we're talking about different teams, Chelsea are now out of the top 4. Tottenham are below Man United, who, as I said before, were 12th. So it's a really disastrous season for both of them. Well, okay, maybe I'm being a bit overdramatic from Chelsea's point of view, but considering where they were, in the title picture competing, it's a huge drop-off from them. But really surprising to see this with Tottenham. And I just want to highlight Postecoglou, and I really respect him a lot. One of the few Tottenham managers who I genuinely respect from the last 20 years. Because he didn't make any excuses. He just said, we weren't good enough. And that's true. When you watch that game, Tottenham were not good enough. They just weren't at it. Arsenal dominated that entire game. And Postecoglou was honest. And I really like that about him. I do think he's a bit naive with his tactics. But honestly, it's going to be such a boss move if he ends up winning the League Cup in his second season. And he's always maintained that he always wins in his second season. And he's 2 games of football from doing that. So let's see what happens with Tottenham. And the last thing I want to highlight is the narrative that's around Arsenal. And I think a lot of Arsenal fans feel that it's us against the world because of how the club is perceived. Arteta was asked a week ago in his press conference, about the ball that was used in the cup games and the fact that it was a different ball from Premier League game. And he just said that, yeah, it's a different ball. And then all these media outlets were like, oh, Arteta criticizes the ball, makes up reasons why Arsenal lost. He never said that. And the perception around Arsenal is Arteta makes excuses. In the whole of 2024, when Arsenal have lost games, Arteta has never ever said that it was because of the referee or because of the ball or because, of something which is an intangible. He just always say that we have to do better. And I think people love to pile on Arsenal and love to pile on Arteta because Arsenal are no longer the club who just, roll over away from home in big games. And the media just looks to attack him. And guys, those of you who feel that Arteta should be out, his role within the club is just growing in power. I understand it's frustrating for certain fans that Arsenal don't win, but they will at some point. I really do hope that it's this season because a lot of other teams are also not really consistently performing. And Arsenal do have it in them to win. It's not out of, reality to win. If results go their way this week, they would be 1 behind Liverpool, with Liverpool having a game in hand. But I think the season is nicely set up. So hope to a very good second half of the season. And if you're an Arsenal fan, I hope we win today against Aston Villa. See you next time.